There was like one group that was particularly active in anti-psychedelic reporting. This group called Symposia, they've actually advised people to start engaging in terrorist tactics. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. The problem was that these people were uncontrollable. They were seriously insane. And I started seeing this more and more with USONA employees harassing me at talks that I gave. I'm annoyed that I have to be the one to say this stuff because it's so fucking obvious, right? It's so obvious.
So what is the deeper agenda of the other side?
Vengeance.
All right, we're here right now with an extremely special guest, Mr. Hamilton Morris. Thank you so much for joining the Fivecast today, man. We're gonna get into some super spicy, potentially lawsuit-inducing conversation pretty soon. But before we get into that, for those who don't know, can you tell the people about what you do and what you're working on right now?
Yes, I made a documentary series about psychoactive drugs for many years, over a decade.
Humanity has a complex relationship with psychoactive substances. Come with me as I travel the world to study their chemistry and impact on society.
And while I was doing that, I also worked in a lab and created new psychedelics. Did that full-time for years, invented a bunch of new psychedelic drugs, published it in scientific journals occasionally, and now I'm totally independently making documentaries about the chemistry of psychedelics that you can watch on my Patreon.
Hell yeah. We gotta make the people pay for that. How much is it per month?
$5.
All right, we're gonna put the link in the description. If you're watching this, you actually have to get Hamilton's Patreon. It's required if you guys want to continue to watch this programming. What's the next one you got coming out, man?
It's a massive scale LSD chemistry project, or something very close to LSD. I created a new LSD type molecule with this chemist, Alex Stratford, and then we tested it and learned a lot about how LSD is made.
Who was the first guy to make it?
Albert Hoffman. Yeah.
And Timothy Leary was the first guy to publicize information about it?
He was the first real LSD evangelist. Arguably, there was actually there were some people before him. I mean, it's a pretty dazzling chemical. Most of the people that tried it, including Albert Hoffman, were blown away because the experience is pretty damn wild. But Leary was the one who was able to make it into a media event. I love Timothy Leary. He's extremely funny, I think. People hate on him now because they think his lack of seriousness and scientific rigor somehow destroyed the psychedelic movement, but I think that's a pretty dumb take.
Yeah. The psychedelic movement has definitely reached a crescendo in the past maybe 10, 15 years, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing an ayahuasca trip tonight.
Literally changed who I am.
You ever did mushrooms?
Jessa Common says ketamine therapy changed her life.
My inclination would be to make this available at least in therapeutic settings and maybe more generally.
I remember when I first started watching your show back in the day on Vice, which was called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, you were one of the first people that I could see who had publicly available documentaries talking about drugs that were not that widely discussed at that time.
Yeah, it's weird because at that point there were very few people doing it, despite there being a huge audience for it. Like, it was this obscure subject that anytime I made anything about it, millions of people would watch it. So there was clearly an appetite for it, and then that interest just kept growing, yet it remained a subject that was treated as if it was somehow obscure. Like when Vice disintegrated, a few of these post-mortem analyses would say, like, they were so crazy they even had a guy who was reporting on drugs, like as if this was like so unthinkable that there would be somebody who would specialize in reporting on this domain.
Science is the problem.
Me llamo Hamilton.
Wow, what an experience.
So they saw that as a factor in the downfall, or they saw that as just a notable point of discussion?
Like a notable point, like this wild media organization even was so crazy that they had somebody who was reporting on drugs.
Yeah, I remember seeing that meme back in the day where it was like a dildo thrown onto a whiteboard.
Yeah, of course, yeah, classic.
And, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like you were one of those people that really launched Vice to that new level back in those days.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of things that they were doing, but it was definitely a domain that legacy media has and continues to fail at miserably. And drug issues, for whatever reason, remain this like marginalized thing where it's totally normalized for journalists to do an absurdly bad job covering them. Like that's just expected, that it will be absolutely terrible.
And why do you think that is?
I think because no matter how serious it is, right? If you had like over 100,000 people in the United States die of drug overdoses in 2021, 2022, more people that died than in the Vietnam War. Like it's a huge deal. At least Americans that died in the Vietnam War. And yet it remains this kind of like thing that no matter how many people die, no matter how much consequence it has on medicine or scientific research or any number of extremely important areas, people just don't take it seriously, or they have some kind of weird resistance to actually understanding it.
The filtered aqueous calcium ethyl sulfate is treated with an aqueous solution of sodium carbonate, forming sodium ethyl sulfate. The cation exchange is visually monitored by the precipitation of insoluble calcium carbonate, which settles to the bottom of the bucket.
So back in those days, did they still have that big Williamsburg office?
No, it was smaller when I started. There were like different, it started out as one thing, then it doubled in size, and then it moved to a different location. When I started, it was much smaller.
What was the culture of the company back then?
It's funny because there is an era that never gets talked about with Vice, because you have these like very dazzling figures like Gavin McInnes that everyone likes to talk about because they're controversial and they're involved in all these politically sensitive domains, or Shane Smith because he was a showman. But the main guy during that period was this editor, Jesse Pearson, who doesn't really get talked about that much because he was just a very talented guy who made great stuff, and there's nothing really controversial about him. But, you know, he was making Vice into this sort of interesting counterculture literary magazine, and he would have people like William Vollman contributing. There was a lot of really good journalism, publishing fiction, a lot of interesting art stuff. Like during that period, I was doing all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't even typically associate with Vice, like getting an original translation of a Stanislaw Lem science fiction short story that had never been translated to English before, stuff like that. So there was a lot of cool stuff going on, but it didn't quite fit the stereotype, so people sort of forgot about most of that type of stuff.
What marked like the distinct end of that era and the beginning of a new one?
It was the pivot to news. It was because Vice was essentially a art and comedy magazine.
Right.
And then they started kind of dipping a toe in the water of like, maybe we can do real news, and we can even rival organizations like the New York Times or CNN. And at first that seemed ridiculous, and then people were really responding to it. And so the news became an increasingly dominant dimension of how the company presented itself to the world.
And how do you see that pivot looking back now?
I mean, I've always had, I don't know, I'd be curious how you feel about this, like, because you actually studied journalism. I've never...
Yeah, I had a communications degree at a small school. Yes, to a certain extent.
I've never studied journalism in any way.
Yeah.
My sense of journalistic ethics is entirely self-constructed based on my sense of what is right and wrong. I don't even really know what is, like, I know that I have to tell the truth, but I don't know what is taught to a student. I know that a lot of the people that I see that do have like graduate degrees in journalism and things like that tend to be some of the worst journalists that I see. And I actually have a snarky hypothesis for that, which is that one of your primary tasks as a journalist is to assess whether or not you're being scammed by somebody.
Right.
And so if you pay $100,000 or your parents pay $100,000 for you to get a master's degree from Columbia for a journalism degree, you're probably not very perceptive to scams.
I'm at Columbia because it's the best place to learn journalism, period.
If this is like what you're doing to become like a blogger at some...
Definitely.
Yeah.
And also, like the way things have changed now, I'm sure it was like a bit different 8 and 10 years ago, but you're more likely to have success as a journalist now in the field and just like through developing your own personal following than you are through a newsroom hierarchy.
And I of course agree. I think like the entire old way of doing things is kind of broken down and has become very independent, which is kind of amazing for people like you and me. It's not great for these legacy institutions because they're going to continue to experience brain drain, because anybody that has a following of more than a couple thousand people can make more money than they would working at the New York Times with an independent news show of some kind. And then the main advantage of these legacy media institutions is legal protection, so that journalists can take risks and they can say things that are dangerous, but the institution is there to protect them with lawyers, to allow them to be free to say whatever it is that they want to say. But that is also breaking down, I think.
I think so too. You're talking about like the CBS settlement and the Paramount lawsuit and stuff like that?
I wasn't referring to that specifically, but that would be an example. But more and more, I see fact-checking not as something that is done to establish factuality, but as something that is done to limit legal liability of a media outlet. Like the fact-checker doesn't really care about what is true, they care about what can result in a lawsuit.
So meaning that if somebody has more capital, they're going to be more cautious about criticizing them.
And that's the whole point should be that if you have a big institution, the advantage is the freedom to actually say things and not be afraid of somebody intimidating you with a lawsuit of one kind or another.
And that's why we need court reform.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know? I'm getting legally threatened as well. And I'm planning to ignore it, but even getting to the point of saying, all right, fuck it, I'm gonna ignore it, that required lawyers to say, okay, I think you can ignore this.
So the thing that you're getting legally threatened about is what we're gonna talk about today.
Yes.
So the audience is gonna get an extremely juicy insider look into a thing that could land you in trouble. But if you do, we'll help you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I'm in motion. I'm in motion. I'm in motion.
What's up, everybody? My name is Andrew Callahan, and you're watching Fivecast, our broadcast podcast type of deal, which is also available on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. Today, we're sitting down with the illustrious Hamilton Morris, as you guys have seen, and we're going to discuss many complicated and intricate things before ultimately diving into how and why a paid activist group called Symposia, who are funded by an allegedly nefarious pharmaceutical company called USONA, successfully interfered with the FDA's plans to legalize MDMA after a series of highly successful clinical trials in which it was proven that MDMA helped many patients, including U.S. Army veterans, cope and heal from their PTSD, anxiety, and depression.
I feel normal again, if that makes any sense.
My world changed. This therapy is the sole reason that my son has a father instead of a folded flag.
Let's back up a bit to give you guys a refresher. These trials began back in 2018 after the end of the Zandemic and were arranged by a group called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, who recently hosted a conference in Denver that we shot some footage at. Thanks for the press pass, fellas. So in these trials, around 80% of participants achieved significant remission, with some no longer even meeting the diagnosis criteria for PTSD after just 2 to 3 supervised MDMA-assisted therapy sessions.
67% of them lost their PTSD diagnosis.
Yet still, as I mentioned, the FDA advisory panel decided to pull the plug last minute as a result of external pressure from Symposia, who ran a multi-year cancel campaign accusing various figures in the MDMA world of abuses of power, sexual misconduct, cultural appropriation, the gentrification of consciousness, and of course the hyper-capitalization of sacred indigenous medicines. Now, MDMA is back to being a Schedule I narcotic lumped in legally with heroin and punishable by up to 3 years in prison and or a $10,000 fine. So we're back to more people being in jail for drugs and treating mental health disorders by bombing people's brains with Prozac and other mind-numbing SSRIs. But anyways, I think this story is very important because the phrase paid protester often reads like some George Floyd era phony baloney Soros bullshit conspiracy used to delegitimize righteous anger about something. But the suits have truly entered the vampire castle, for real this time, and are using progressive language to destroy progressive causes. And alternative media is complicit. Anyways, like I mentioned, Hamilton's gonna cover a lot of ground today. This episode actually took me 2 separate watches to really digest in its totality, so if you wanna watch this whole thing on half speed and low pitch, I don't blame you. Also, I feel a bit obligated to tell you guys, our supporters, that we are going on tour this fall with the whole damn gang, and it's gonna be a movie for real. All right, if you're watching this right now, I got some good news. We are going on tour. That's right, a 26-city national tour called the Channel 5 Carnival. It's gonna be a night to remember for the rest of your life. A roving adventure circus coming to 26 cities in the US, Mexico, and Canada. We're gonna have a cohort of locally sourced battle rappers on stage, duking it out to instrumentals. We're gonna have magicians and illusionists illusionists, also locally sourced from each city, on stage, blowing people's mind with magic tricks. Then we're gonna have a talent show, and we're gonna have a Kill Tony style panel right there, judging people's talents. So if you hula hoop, break dance, freestyle, or whatever the hell you do, you can become famous and have a fantastic evening at Channel 5 Carnival, and if you win, you get a free prize. Additionally, I'm gonna be screening 3 secret documentaries. They're secret because they're inappropriate and cannot be posted on YouTube. Not gonna say much more, but if you've been to Channel 5 Live, you kinda know what I'm talking about. It may or may not involve Berlin and urine. I'm not saying it, but I mean, it could be a part of it. Anyways, if you want to buy tickets to Channel 5 Carnival, you can go to www.channel5.news/pages/carnival, and you're going to see ticket links right there for a variety of shows. I'm talking Orlando. I'm talking Durham, North Carolina. I'm talking about New Orleans. I'm talking about a lot of other places. For real, it's going to be sick, so see you guys on tour, hopefully. Yo, Channel 5, what the fuck? Holy shit! What up, man? Hey, man. How's it going? Have you ever been to Richmond before?
I have been to Richmond.
How would you like free Channel 5 Carnival tickets to the Richmond show?
I would fucking love that, man.
I got you, player. Alrighty, there's that. I'm gonna put the ticket link in the bio for the C5 Carnival tickets as well as the description box to make things easy. Anyways, back to Hamilton. Let's dive into it. So, what the heck is going on?
With the whole psychedelic world?
No. With the legal threats you're getting.
Oh, with the legal threats I'm getting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, these legal threats that I'm getting. So in the psychedelic world, there's been a weird turn that has taken place where there was a period where pretty much all of the reporting that you saw was extremely positive.
We are in the early stages of what future generations may one day describe as a kind of psychedelic renaissance.
I thought it was like vaguely corny, but as far as problems go, it was a very minor one to have. You know, everyone is writing these stories like, gee whiz, magic mushrooms, you thought they were a drug, but they're actually a treatment for depression. And there's actually a study going on at Johns Hopkins University, and they're finding out that these magic mushrooms occasion mystical type experience. Like, so I was like, all right, whatever. We get a bunch of news articles saying that psychedelics aren't bad. This is not really a very exciting revelation to me, but it's a hell of a lot better than stories about how it's good that someone's getting arrested for possessing drugs or something like that, which is kind of the norm. And this was around the time that I left journalism to just do chemistry full time for a couple of years. I was like, this is all on autopilot. Like, people are gonna write, the clinical trials will progress, people will write their puff pieces about the pharmaceutical companies and how they're doing something good, which, as far as I'm concerned, they are actually. Like, I think it's a good thing to develop MDMA or psilocybin for treatment of depression. But as soon as I left the public sphere, I just started to notice more and more of these extremely negative articles coming out that seemed to nonsensically scaremonger in various ways. There's a term for it that this scholar Oliver Davis gave. He called it the entrepreneurship of psychedelic negativity. And it's like, it almost was like its own microeconomy in this world of people writing these articles about the gentrification of consciousness. Or
Whoa. We got to back up a bit. What is the gentrification of consciousness? How do you gentrify something that doesn't exist? Well, it does exist, but not in a tangible form.
You'll have to write a think piece about it. I don't know.
No, I mean, what the hell does that mean?
Who the fuck knows what that means?
No, you read the article. What are they saying that means?
That it's bad that psychedelics are being developed as medicines because conceivably somebody might make money off of it.
Oh, like white capitalists?
Yeah.
And okay, so this has to do with Native Americans.
Vaguely.
Because they use psychedelics like peyote for ceremonies. So they're saying that like the suits making things like the sacred medicines of the indigenous peoples available for therapy is gentrifying the medicine.
Basically, yes.
Okay, cool. So I figured it out.
Yeah.
All right, dope. So you're seeing a bunch of negative puff pieces about different kinds of drugs.
Yeah. The psychedelic industrial complex, a lot of this kind of moralistic hand-wringing about patents, weird articles about the ethics of treating PTSD in veterans.
They're sticking up for veterans.
No. Actually, this is like essentially anti-veteran. They're saying essentially they got PTSD by fighting wars for the American war machine, therefore they deserve to suffer. This is the basic idea.
Even for Vietnam vets, they feel this way? 17-year-old kids who got drafted?
All
vets? If you're drafted and you have PTSD, you're not a part of the American war machine, you had no choice.
Right, and it's almost entirely impoverished people who are doing it because it afforded some opportunities in education or healthcare, and because they're being pummeled with different types of propaganda, and it's not a very compassionate way of thinking about people's motivations for being involved in the military, even if you're anti-American war and anti-military, which I generally speaking am, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that I think that veterans shouldn't receive effective treatment for PTSD because it promotes the American imperialist war machine.
It's asinine.
Yeah. But you saw more and more and more of this stuff, and I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking, oh God, everyone has to write with this tone. It has to always be another one of these articles making psychedelics look bad for something seemingly innocuous or not even bad at all. Mm-hmm. And so I started wondering more and more about how things were getting this bad, how it had gotten to the point that more and more of the reporting was just this sort of nonsense. And I started talking to people about it. One of the things that had become very prominent was this patent scaremongering. This was like immensely prevalent. And at the beginning, there was this patent attorney named Graham Pechenik, and he told me the story himself, actually, where he'd gone to a MAPS conference and he felt bad that no one was really interested in his work as a patent attorney. And then he kind of started strategically scaring people about patents, and suddenly everyone was interested in what he had to say. So this started out with frightening people about I can't even remember who, someone patented DMT vapes. And so he's, tweeting about this, like, oh my God, DMT vapes are being patented. We've got to end this DMT vape patent. But this is just such an irrelevant distraction because DMT is a Schedule I controlled substance federally. So the idea of patent police being what we have to, there's no such thing as patent police either, by the way. But the idea of like some imaginary patent enforcement force that is going to come and arrest people for possessing patent-protected DMT vapes is just ridiculous. It's a non-existent problem. It has never occurred. Also, the patent that he was battling was terrible and unenforceable. The whole thing was just ridiculous. And whatever, people say lots of ridiculous stuff, but what worries me is you can frighten people about irrelevant issues. So then you have people worried about DMT patents instead of drug policy reform, instead of actually recognizing the real issue, which is federal prohibition of DMT, and trying to change the laws so that we could even live in a world where this ridiculous concern of patent infringement on your DMT vape would be a reality. Like that's like, we should be so lucky as to live in a world where that is a legitimate concern, but it's very much not the case. And then maybe one more just brief example of like how bad this got, because I think people listening to this, they don't even know. Like I'm friends with this guy named Timothy Tyler, and he's like one of these 3-strike law ultimate horror stories where I think he'd like sold weed or something when he was like 18, and then maybe when he was 19 he got caught selling LSD and was sentenced to life in prison, and he was in prison for like 25 years and only got out of prison because Obama directly pardoned him. So this is like drug war worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Like you would have died in a cage for selling a relatively small amount of LSD, not that any amount justifies being locked in a cage for the rest of your life. And just by direct intervention of the President of the United States were you able to be set free. And I remember I was like driving with him to a conference. I was doing work at a university that was being funded by one of these pharmaceutical companies. And he was like, I don't know, man, like, aren't you worried about that company? And I was like, no, not really. They've been pretty cool to me. And he's like, well, I heard that they patented psilocybin. And I was like, yeah, they patented like one form of it for treatment of like one type of depression. And he's like, but that's not good. Like, what are my friends gonna do who sell mushrooms? And I was like, oh, your friends can't sell mushrooms right now. It's like federally illegal. Like, but this was like, and the point here is not to say that this guy is like, this shit is very confusing for people. And so when you add all this like journalists fanning the flames of fear with irrelevant issues, people don't identify what the actual problem is. Like you had people that were concerned that patent infringement was the issue with selling psychedelics, as opposed to federal prohibition of every commonly used psychedelic, which are all placed in Schedule 1, which is the most restrictive legal category that's reserved for drugs that not only have the highest abuse potential as conceptualized by the government, but no recognized medical use. So yeah, so this keeps going, and I don't know if I should just go right into this kind of.
Fuck it, homie.
So there was like one group that was particularly active in anti-psychedelic reporting. They had become, and I think like every community has some version of this group. Like comedy had that guy, Seth Simons, you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
He was like the person who got
Shane
Gillis canceled.
So he's the one who went and found that Asian quote from back in the day, made it a whole thing, destroyed the guy's career for a couple of years.
Yeah. So, and that was his specialty. It was like, let me dig up something that proves that somebody is a fascist or a racist, or let me find a joke that I can take out of context to prove that someone is wicked in some way.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Yes.
It's a weird hustle.
It's a weird hustle, but I think every community, like I guarantee there's like someone listening to this in the like fly fishing community or something, and he's like, and there's like a dude like that who's like trying to prove that fly fishing is racist or something, or like just like there became a type of person that became obsessed with proving the wickedness of their adversaries within whatever niche community they were a part of. And so this group were terrorizing everyone in the psychedelic world. They were called symposia. They've actually just totally self-destructed at this point because they all started accusing each other of impropriety, and by the end of it, every single one of them had their own allegations.
I want to say that I resigned from Symposia at the end of last year because I was concerned about a former colleague's conduct and the trajectory of the institution as a whole. A major factor was that Symposia failed to investigate a formal complaint of unethical behavior filed against one of the members of the organization, and then subsequently failed to address a multitude of additional issues that were presented to the team.
Which is, of course, a typical and classic parable of the left eating itself, which is sad, because I'm not just suggesting that there weren't actual problems and don't continue to be actual problems related to psychedelic research and the medicalization and therapeutic implementation of psychedelics. They're real problems. We could talk about them for the next 10 hours, but the issue is that the sorts of people that tend to appoint themselves as police officers to protect a space are often the least ethical, craziest people in a given group. It's like the sorts of people that want to be cops are usually the last people that you want to be a cop. And so this group started out very vocally pledging their absolute support for a pharmaceutical company called Usona. The, at one time, leader of the group, who went by the pseudonym David Nichols, which was oddly stolen from a prominent psychedelic chemist, which makes it confusing to talk about. And so he had announced his absolute support for the pharmaceutical company Usona, but around this, in the same announcement, advised people to start terrorizing and engaging in terrorist tactics against any individuals involved with Usona's competitor Compass. And this became kind of the de facto stance of all reporting, creating this highly simplistic moral binary where Usona were the good guys and their business competitor Compass were the bad guys.
I think we also need to ask, who are the gatekeepers in such a model? And as some of these places talk about mainstreaming psychedelics, we have to ask, what is the mainstream? What are the effects of mainstreaming psychedelics? And are the benefits, supposed benefits, what they're claiming?
And so I'm like watching all this stuff unfold, working in a lab that's receiving money from Compass, thinking, geez, this sure seems really unfair, but damn if I'm the last person that should be talking about this. I have a legitimate conflict of interest. So I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe another journalist is gonna come along and talk about this or something, so I don't have to be the one, because this is fucking weird. And I just started watching more and more weird stuff. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse, where the Usona was, instead of like issuing press releases, they would just seemingly issue all of their stories through this one Vice blogger named Shayla Love.
Vice is involved.
Yeah, Vice is involved, actually. Vice was the primary instrument of this, because Vice doesn't even have any kind of fact-checking whatsoever. maybe for a very brief period at the magazine, they had fact checking, but Vice was a perfect tool for this particular thing. Like any person I've ever talked to at Vice about this, no one has been surprised at all that this happened. So they would say things, representatives or funders of USONA would leak these stories to this Vice blogger, Shayla Love, saying these things like, Compass is interfering with legalization efforts in Oregon. And we got to sound the alarm on this.
So they were making it seem like Compass was actually gatekeeping and blocking the legalization of psychedelics.
Which is a very powerful idea, because that's kind of what you would expect would happen, right? You have a bunch of ultra-rich people getting involved in funding multi-million-dollar clinical trials on psychedelics. It's costing a huge amount of money. Wouldn't non-medical use of psychedelics represent a threat to their business? So it makes intuitive sense when you think about it that a pharmaceutical company would do that. The issue was that it just wasn't true. And if you read the article, it's very bizarre. It's like the evidence that they have for this interference didn't come from any of the people that were part of this initiative, Measure 109 in Oregon, to legalize psilocybin. In fact, they explicitly said that there had been no interference. It came from a random-ass psychiatrist named George Keepers, who had received a friendly email from someone involved with one of these pharmaceutical companies, and that was it. So there's actually no evidence for it whatsoever. Again, this is almost hard to talk about. Like, as I'm telling you, I'm like, damn, this is a complicated story, and it involves all these names. But the real takeaway is that there was an enormous amount of extremely bad reporting that was coming out that was distorting the way people thought about these things. It's an ironic twist that this false information about Compass interfering with legalization efforts in Oregon came from a funder of USONA, a company that was providing direct financial incentives to MAPS, saying they would give them money if they halted all drug policy reform. So the company that was actually interfering with drug policy reform was then planting an idea that their competitor was doing exactly what they were truly doing.
So double gaslighting.
Yeah, double gaslighting. Again, complicated shit.
InfoWars.
So who does fund you guys? Where do you guys get funding from?
So we are not currently discussing our funders.
InfoWars. And I mean, this is like one of the weird things about journalism and storytelling is when a story gets complicated enough, it just starts to sound like the gibberish of a conspiracy theorist.
No, I'm following you.
Okay. It's like, but you know, when you talk to someone, they're like, oh, Alan Dulles and Sidney Gottlieb, and they were working with Operation Paperclip. And you just...
We're going to have visual aid for this interview.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll go into it.
So at the juncture we're at right now is that you have this pharmaceutical company making it seem like their rival pharmaceutical company is trying to block the legalization of psychedelics, but it's actually them that are trying to block legalization of psychedelics. They're using Vice to disseminate negative press about this company while simultaneously encouraging terroristic action. When you said terroristic, do you mean like car bombs and stuff?
I can read you exactly what they wrote, actually.
They call for violent action against a rival pharmaceutical company?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to see it.
Yeah. I could pull it up right now.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the screen grab. Support USONA. Absolutely! Exclamation point. This is the first line. But no, I mean shutting down Compass independently, fucking with their business operations in ways designed to raise the cost of operating. Hey, they want to exist according to the logic of capitalism? Let's leverage that logic to make it too expensive to operate. Here's a post I made over on Kat's earlier Compass post, Kat being another person who is paid by the CEO of USONA, reportedly, although I have not been able to, I've heard that from two people, but haven't been able to verify it, but I suspect that it's the case. What do we do? Shut it down. There are plenty of strategies that could be developed to make that happen, ranging from milquetoast to militant. Facebook isn't really the best place to discuss some of those tactics. This is a Facebook post public. But some spur-of-the-moment ideas I could imagine right now might be organizing call-ins to Compass and or associated research institutions such as MAPS to express disgust and result in tying up the lines, thereby making some aspects of general operations untenable, or at least frustrating. The same could be applied to the individuals involved. 2, continued writing/coverage of how the for-profit commodified approach puts us all in jeopardy and threatens more open access models of medical treatment. 3, check out the strategies some folks use to oppose Huntington Life Science. This is like threatening people with weapons. I'm not necessarily advocating any of those strategies, but there's a good precedent for relatively small groups of people tanking major corporations through utilization of militant tactics. And then it just goes on, it's multiple paragraphs.
Interesting. So this is all like pretty fascinating because this idea of like paid protest and controlled opposition oftentimes gets like thrown around, especially in the conservative media sphere, to like delegitimize anger and outrage when it comes to things that are happening.
The Tesla rally. Some of these guys are paid agitators and paid protesters.
It's typically not true.
But I find it really interesting here that the company USONA is using this sort of like anti-capitalist, anti-fascist language to do their bidding and kind of mobilize like gullible people against the people that are actually doing the good thing.
Oh yeah. This is, as far as I know, this is the only example of this that I knew about. And I always had this weird thing where I was like, why is this anti-capitalist dude saying support a company that's run by like a former Exxon and Shell oil futures trader and a billionaire bioscience dude? Like, it just didn't make sense. Obviously, people are routinely hypocrites, so it's not that crazy. But there was something where I was like, I fucking strongly suspect that this dude is getting paid by USONA. And I started seeing this more and more with USONA employees harassing me at talks that I gave. It's like a couple stories, but just weird stuff. There's one where a USONA employee who never identified herself as such was like, I want you to explain what you're giving back to the indigenous people of the world, or something like that. Right, and the audience erupts into applause.
Yeah, thank you. I have a two-part question about the psilocybin polymorph A compound that Compass has recently patented. And so from your perspective as an obviously very accomplished chemist, Hamilton, who has, as I understand, recently made a career transition to work with that company, I wonder what your thoughts on the legitimacy of that patent as a new innovation, first, and if you're able to speak to that, and two, how you think that patent impacts the supply chain, and particularly in the context of the issues of indigenous reciprocity that we've been talking about this afternoon.
It was nonsense, like arguably, everyone who lives in the United States does. I'm not like saying that there isn't, I'm not saying that it's like not something worth discussing, but there was nothing that I was doing that was based on indigenous knowledge. I was synthesizing completely novel tryptamines that contain atoms that are never found in tryptamines in nature, like fluorine. Like this is just like totally synthetic stuff that is not derived from indigenous knowledge in any way. It actually, if anything, was derived from like a steampunk cannabinoid baron from New Zealand. That dude, if someone deserved reciprocity, it would be the...
I wish someone would describe me that way. So someone's tripping on you at a conference about not giving back to indigenous people. They're a paid plant from a pharmaceutical corporation.
Yes.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel sad. It makes me feel hurt. It makes me feel vaguely disgusted by all of this. And it was not even just this woman. There was another USONA employee who hit me with one of my least favorite. Actually, this is like my true Achilles heel. I made multiple pieces about psychedelic toad venom, but like one of the most pedantic, irritating criticisms is people will say, oh, it's not really a venom. Technically, it's a poison.
Like many amphibians, Bufo alvarius possesses a powerful defense against predators. When bitten, the toad secretes a milky white fluid from its parotid glands that can poison its attacker, making them extremely ill and sometimes causing cardiac arrest.
That makes your blood boil?
Yeah, it makes my blood boil.
Do you start yelling? I can't picture you yelling.
No.
I'm sure you've done it before.
There's a video recording of this. I actually was able to contain my volcanic rage.
So what did you say?
I said, something like, oh, that's a teleological distinction, and it's really not a recognized one by anyone in the toxicology community. Like, there's a hyper-restrictive definition of the word venom that it has to be injected by a fang. It's not the dictionary definition of venom. I think a better one is to think about venoms as something that are actively delivered defensively as opposed to like a passive substance, which would be a poison. Anyway, it is a venom. All scholars who have ever studied this have called it a venom. Anyway, so the USONA employee after I gave a talk about this, corrected me, saying that it's not a venom.
And they're coming and they're being rude to you and interrupting your talks because of your association with Compass, or just because they feel like you're a leading figure in the pro-psychedelic legalization movement?
Because of the Compass stuff.
Okay, specifically because of your chemistry work with Compass.
Yeah, that was the reason, yeah. And because I was considered, I think they had pretty much totally monopolized any media coverage. Everything was pro-USONA. The New York Times wrote an article with a kind of glowing profile of the work that was done by USONA, profiling this guy, Bob Jesse, and never even mentioning that he was employed by the pharmaceutical company. Very weird stuff. And USONA did something very complicated where they divided themselves into all of these different companies. So USONA is a nonprofit. They receive their money from a for-profit, massive biotech company called Promega. So the profits from Promega are swept into USONA. There was a lawsuit from the shareholders of Promega suing the owner of USONA for funneling profit into, because they have a huge amount of money. I think they have, I looked on GuideStar, and just the property that USONA owns alone is like 80 million in Wisconsin. But then USONA has additional companies connected to it that are the same company, the same tax ID number, but they don't represent themselves as being connected. So there's Freedom to Operate, which is their patent liberation company, where they target anybody that holds patents that are competing with USONA and try to destroy them. Then there's Porta Sophia, which is a psychedelic prior art database where they index literature that could be used to interfere with competitors' patents, but notably do not list prior art for the patents held by the owners of USONA.
So this is really like it's almost like a deep state situation.
Well, it's like, this is the thing, is like, I have a lot of stories to tell. Like, we could talk about this forever. I'm annoyed that I have to be the one to say this stuff because it's so fucking obvious, right? It's so obvious that these like billionaires do not have people's best interests in mind, and that they create these like pledges to know the not making money off of psychedelics pledge, and frame themselves as doing all this advocacy work, when the reality is they are incentivizing MAPS, ceasing drug policy reform work, paying activists to terrorize their competitors, creating a fraudulent prior art database that doesn't index any of the work that would interfere with their own patents, and asking for donations from the public as if what they're doing serves the Commonwealth in some way, when it's just about their own shitty business.
What's the connection between them and Symposia? Is that jumping too far ahead?
No, it's not jumping too far ahead. So Symposia had a lot of people that were involved. It was kind of like the gutter that collected the dregs of the psychedelic world, and most of the people were nutcases. Occasionally, there would be someone who's actually, as I said previously, there are legitimate criticisms of the psychedelic scape. So like, sometimes someone would come along and they would be legitimately anti-capitalist, and they'd say, oh, look, there's this group, the Critical Psychedelic Studies. They're shining light on the problems with sexual abuse or whatever. And there was this guy named Travis Kitchens who had written some anti-psychedelic articles that were like, why the state shouldn't fund ibogaine research, because I can't remember what his reason was. I disagreed with it. And so I'd always been suspicious of this guy because he wrote for Symposia, and because he wrote anti-drug articles that struck me as anti-drug. He's subsequently written some articles that I really like. So he had written to me before, and I hadn't responded to him because I was suspicious, and they said, we really need to talk. And at this point, I already knew that Symposia had been receiving money from the Sarlo family, which is another thing. But the USONA connection was the one that I had heard indirectly from an enormous number of people. And he said, you're not going to believe this, but these people, they're not legitimate. They're actually receiving money to behave this way. And I was like, yeah, I fucking know. Everyone knows. No journalists are writing about it, but everyone knows. And he's like, oh, and they're receiving money from Bob Jesse from USONA. I start telling people about this, and Bob Jesse admits to secretly providing money to David Nichols at the time that he announced his absolute support for USONA and began to advocate terrorist action against individuals involved with Compass. We then confronted him at the MAPS conference, and he admitted to doing this. Can I ask you a quick question?
You may. Hi.
Hey, I don't know if we've met. Maybe we met a long time ago.
I think we might have been on stage once a long time ago, but didn't actually say hi.
Yeah.
But your reputation precedes you.
Good
to see you.
So I feel like this is sort of an aggressive question. I feel bad asking, but a couple of ex-Symposia members have contacted me, and they told me that you had been providing them with money and intel in what they felt was a effort to destroy Compass.
No.
No.
Let's see. Not directly my money, but I'm responsible for having sent to Symposia before things really blew up and got nasty. 2 separate donations, small amounts of money, and not for the purpose of getting them to do anything.
So why do you think they said that? Yeah, and why were you giving them money?
Well, because for a little while they were saying things no one else would say. The same reason you would give Lucid News money.
And then, because I know that you were involved with the Sarlo Family Foundation, and they've, paid an enormous amount of money to Niché and to Symposia to run this campaign against MAPS, $185,000
Oh,
reportedly.
I didn't know that, but that was long after I left that foundation.
Yeah.
Long after.
And they're suing me now, or attempting to.
Why?
Because I said that they had done this.
Well, suing you for something like defamation or national damage?
Defamation.
Well, guess what? My understanding, not a lawyer, is that truth is an absolute defense against defamation.
He then came up to me and said that we couldn't use the audio because audio is sacred. Then he said that he'd talk to me about it off the record. I mean, at this point, I don't even really care. It's just, but the question is, why would somebody do something like this? And I think they thought they could control this extremist group of nutcases and give them a little money, give them a little intel, and sick them on Compass because it had worked so well with other people. Like this Vice blogger, Shayla Love, was totally obedient to the interests of USONA. Anything they told her, she would uncritically repeat. So you should be able to do the same thing with everyone. It had worked very well for them in the past. And the problem was that these people were uncontrollable. They were seriously insane.
With wizardry and everything like that, yeah, it kind of is. That's what patents are. They're like magic spells, essentially. And the introduction of his book lays that out. I pasted a thing
tracing it back to alchemy, like literally.
Yeah, he traces it back to alchemy. It's amazing.
Dangerously insane. This is why funding terrorist organizations to do your bidding is usually a bad idea historically.
Yeah, every time we do it, it always backfires.
It hasn't ended well.
Yeah.
It's just, you'd think we'd learned that lesson. It hasn't ended well.
So a lot of this is coming into the fold right now, specifically because of the bad news that was, I think, received this year, if not last year, about MDMA.
A few hours ago, the FDA rejected MDMA therapy as a treatment for PTSD.
Yes.
For those who don't know about any of that, can you kind of give them a brief overview of what happened with the MDMA stuff?
Oh man, yeah, I can try, but it's a complicated story. But MDMA is this drug that people had been investigating therapeutically for decades. It was made illegal in 1986. The DEA's own administrative law judge had actually recommended against its placement in Schedule 1. He had felt that the case made for its therapeutic use didn't warrant its placement in Schedule 1. He thought people should be able to pursue it medically. But the DEA ignored their own judge's ruling and placed it in Schedule 1. So this guy, Rick Doblin, was totally radicalized by this. He actually was selling MDMA at the time to fund the legal defense to prevent the prohibition of MDMA, which is pretty badass.
He said, I want to be a psychedelic psychotherapist. And we just laughed. Here we are, 41, 42 years later, where he has just stayed on that path.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy.
Yeah, we had a guy in Seattle named Phoenix Jones. He was a superhero who would go out with a gold cape to kind of bust up drug dealers and drug operations.
My name is Phoenix Jones, and I'm the leader of the Seattle superhero movement.
He got caught with a giant underground MDMA lab and distribution center where he would sell all the MDMA still dressed as Phoenix Jones, which I thought was dope, but it kind of ruined his reputation as a superhero.
So Rick Doblin went on this quest to reverse the prohibition of MDMA, really does everything by the book. He decides that in order for people to take him seriously, he has to get a PhD from Harvard. So he gets a PhD from Harvard. Then he initiates clinical trials. It takes him close to 40 years to get to the point where he's pushed MDMA through all 3 phases of clinical trials as a completely independent, nonprofit pharmaceutical company, which is like unheard of, because clinical development of a drug costs hundreds of millions of dollars. He's an insane fundraiser. He was able to get the money to do this. And it was like extremely inspiring. Everyone was very, very excited about this. And he'd done everything as well as you could possibly do it. Like, this is a bit of a tangent. I feel like this is going to go on forever if I go on these tangents. But I'll just say very briefly, there had been an issue in the 1980s with one of the most prominent psychedelic therapists sexually abusing patients. And so Rick knew that that had derailed things at the beginning. So he designed the entire therapeutic protocol to absolutely minimize chances of sexual abuse. So each patient had 2 therapists that were watching over them, a male and a female, and the entire thing was recorded with a video camera. And he thought this would be enough, that there would be no chance of any kind of sexual abuse. And it worked for the 300 plus patients that were part of these trials, except after one of the therapeutic sessions, one of the therapists had a 2-year sexual romantic relationship with a patient. So this was like a catastrophic thing. The therapist lost their license, the MAP severed all ties, issued an apology letter, paid the victims therapy costs, did everything in their power to prevent it and everything in their power to make amends in the wake of this thing that had occurred. But Symposia latched onto this, realizing that if they could exploit this woman's sexual relationship with a therapist, they could use it to derail the entire MDMA movement. This is complicated. And they were also receiving money from this other group as well. And so they hired a firm to issue press releases to journalists. I guess there's like journalists that actually just respond to press releases and will do uncritically stories that are told to them as...
There is?
Yeah. And so they get all these, stories in Vox where they're getting interviews about how they're crusading to protect women from sexual abuse or whatever. And the whole thing is very unsettling. They have a citizen's petition to the FDA to have a hearing to call into question the legitimacy of the clinical trials. And during this hearing, it was disastrous. All of the Symposia members were able to sort of like game a lottery in some way where they were disproportionately represented in the public commentary period. 5 of the people, I think it was 5 of 20 people that spoke, were contributors to Symposia. And they had no qualms whatsoever, even though it's a serious crime, about lying to the FDA, or at the very least, dramatically manipulating the FDA. Like, even some of the true things they said were said in such a way as to frighten people in nonsense manipulations of one kind or another. Like, there was this one really horrifying guy named Brian Pace.
My name is Brian Pace. I am a lecturer teaching psychedelic studies in the Department of Plant Pathology at The Ohio State University.
He says very seriously, like, if MDMA is approved, these harms will scale.
Harms and misconduct will scale if they are allowed to train and certify therapists.
And he's right. The harms probably will scale, but the harms were extremely minimal and outweighed by the benefits, which will also scale. Harms always scale with benefits. I mean, that's just what you would expect. It's like, if you allow people to ride bicycles, the harms associated with riding bicycles will scale, as will the benefits. It's just a nonsense bullshit statement, but if you say it the right way, you can really frighten people. It was a lot of that. Really, the most notable instance was the kind of ringleader of Symposia at this point claimed that a MAPS therapist named Veronica Gold had pinned down a patient while they screamed, "Get your fucking hands off of me," but that she would not stop.
Veronica Gold, a Lykos supervisor, trainer, and phase 3 therapist, describes pinning down a patient as their distress escalated to the point of shouting, quote, "Go away, get your effing hands away from me," end quote. But Gold did not stop.
And I remember hearing this and thinking, this is crazy. I thought I knew about everything that was going on. I hadn't heard never heard this woman's name before. I hadn't heard about any of this. And I look at her citation for this claim, and it's a book called Integral Psychedelic Therapy with a chapter written by this therapist, but it's not a MAPS trial and it's not MDMA. And the section that she's describing is a patient who's speaking to the memory of their father, saying, "Get your fucking hands off."
So a ghost.
Yeah.
Like being pinned down by your dad's ghost.
Well, actually, the pin down thing was completely fabricated.
Oh, it sounds horrible, or potentially therapeutic, but it doesn't sound like it was.
Yeah. So this was insane to watch. And it was horrible. Like, to me, this is just another chapter in the endless moronic harassment campaign by this group of psychos. But for people like that woman, Veronica Gold, that's like their life being just publicly humiliated in front of the FDA by some nutcase who has no qualms about destroying the reputation of a stranger if it serves this agenda of preventing the approval of MDMA.
And were they successful in preventing that?
The FDA ruled against it.
Holy shit. So there's no legal MDMA?
No. Yeah, the FDA ruled against it.
Even despite the fact that the clinical trials were a success?
Yes.
A few hours ago, the FDA rejected MDMA therapy as a treatment for PTSD. It's a setback for the growing movement to use psychedelics for treatment of mental health conditions. It comes as the agency was under intense pressure from politicians and veterans to approve the drug. But back in June, the FDA's own advisory committee said there wasn't enough evidence the therapy was safe or effective.
Okay, I want to give credit to them for doing this horrible, horrible thing. But the reality, I think, is that this was already somewhat precarious. And whenever you have something that's precarious, it doesn't necessarily take all that much to shift the balance. So it was already a revolutionary idea to approve MDMA as a treatment for PTSD. And it didn't take all that much. There were other, I think, very small issues with the clinical trial. One was that they didn't record whether or not MDMA causes euphoria.
It does.
Yeah, there you go. So you were able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't record it because, as is obvious to anyone that knows anything, it does cause euphoria. And so the idea was that this limited a objective appraisal of the abuse potential of MDMA, which has been studied endlessly.
So abuse potential meaning if you take MDMA during a therapy session, like your therapist gets weird and starts fucking with you and shit. Is that what they're talking about?
I think they were like, or you'd become addicted to MDMA after a therapy session.
I mean, getting addicted to MDMA sounds difficult, especially with the come down, but I guess if you HTP it every time, you could like live like that forever.
Well, then it's also no pharmaceutical or insurance company is going to allow someone to continuously use MDMA psychotherapy for PTSD in a way that would allow addiction. The whole thing was just absurd. So I feel like we've gotten really into the details on all of this. And there was a journalist, Rachel Newer, who was writing about this for the New York Times. And it was so hard for the journalists that were trying to do this. And this is the thing that really gets me, is like, now I see all these people with Twitter bios that are like psychedelics and mental health reporter for, and now that it's easy to talk about this, now that news outlets are like willing to buy your shitty story about this or that, like ketamine, telemedicine, like, have we gone too far? Kind of like whatever your like little scare story is. But like the people that are still really working on this are taking enormous risks, and telling the true story of this stuff sucks tremendously. Like, it will result in lawsuits, it will result in legal harassment. And the only reason I'm talking about this publicly is because this narrative has remained almost entirely unchallenged.
I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. How did you feel whenever the FDA ruled against MDMA therapy?
Oh, I was so depressed. And I haven't even gone into the RFK Jr. appointed psychedelic czar of the United States was advising Symposia during their hearing, right? Like weird shit, like, or his wording was, he provided them an opinion during the hearing.
But I mean, like, it's obviously something that you feel strongly about. Like, what bummed you out the most about that situation?
So many things. One is that there was a certain momentum that was being built where it seemed like a major change in the practice of psychiatry was on the horizon, that MDMA would be approved, psilocybin would be approved, novel psychedelics would be approved, because I'm not someone that's going to claim that psychedelics will cure all diseases or will end all war or will usher in a new era of humanity, but I definitely think they can help people, and I definitely think they're as good or better than the standard of care in many of the indications that are being studied and should be available. And so MDMA for PTSD was considered the safest bet. That was considered the one that, like, of course, Of course, MDMA for PTSD, of course that one is going to work. So to get rejected on the one that everyone was confident was going to work was immensely discouraging, especially when you consider that this was the culmination of a lifetime of work by Rick Doblin against all odds, doing this as an independent, nonprofit pharmaceutical company, actually right up until the finish line when they shifted to a for-profit by necessity. But like, it was like a genuinely inspiring story. And you know, you see this a lot with psychedelics. This is why I think people need to be more aware of all of this. Like, I had spent 2 weeks at DEA headquarters covering this effort by the DEA to prohibit these two very obscure psychedelics that are used in scientific research. I just got to see exactly how the mechanisms of prohibition work within the DEA headquarters. And it's not pleasant, and it highlighted the absurdity of all this like gentrification of consciousness type stuff. It's like, we've got real good old-fashioned narcs, like people that are just down to lock people in cages for the rest of their lives for having drugs. There's no shortage of those people in the government right now, and their paychecks depend on that. And if people instead focus on nonsensical issues about who patented a DMT vape and not old-fashioned Nixon-Reagan era prohibitionist law that's still in place, we are not going to live in a free society.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a microcosm of like the whole left right now in general. I mean, I think now they're realizing it's too late. But for a long time, it's like people were so busy with this just like infighting and moral grandstanding that they don't realize that the enemy's so unified. And most importantly, that like the demons you're trying to slay, like they look at these little trivial disputes as just like hilarious cannon fodder.
As they should. Like you look at some Bernie Sanders Instagram post where he's like, the United States must halt all funding to Israel immediately, and all the comments are like, yeah, there's a word for it, Bernie. It's called genocide. Maybe try using it. It's like, he's on your fucking side. Yeah. He's like, but he didn't use exactly the language that you want. He's doing what you should want a representative to do. And yeah, so this kind of cannibalistic tendency of the left is very unfortunate, because cohesion is required, and it's so easy to manipulate, as we've now seen. We had one pharmaceutical company and one family exploit a couple psychos on the left and cause a massive amount of damage to psychedelic progress.
So the leftists that got soaked up into the symposia orbit were in fact genuine like far leftists who had that cannibalistic virus? Because okay, so the stoner theory here is like, oh fuck, this corporation who stopped MDMA from being legalized, that's just like big pharma and the Sackler family and the SSRI lobby like trying to stop acid from healing the world, bro. MDMA. Obviously, we know it's not that simple.
Yeah.
So what is the deeper agenda of the other side?
There's multiple agendas. And the deeper agenda is a complicated story, but it's because a very rich Holocaust survivor was befriended by a board member of MAPS who gave him MDMA. He had a cathartic release of his emotional trauma related to surviving the Holocaust, decided to leave his fortune to MAPS. His estranged daughter, Susie, was horrified that she was going to lose part of her inheritance, and then funded the opposition campaign against MAPS. That's what happened.
And that's why MDMA was banned from being legalized?
That's a potential major reason, yes.
So there's what are some of the other reasons that could possibly be in the shadows here?
I think also USONA funding symposia played a role as well. USONA was absolutely delighted by the rejection.
What's USONA's deeper agenda?
Vengeance.
Against Compass?
Yeah, Compass vengeance was a big one.
In terms of company rivalry? Just
yeah.
Arbitrary profit motivation?
Yeah, and I think these are very skilled businessmen that run USONA. I think that they want a form of domination, maybe even more than that, a sense of moral superiority, which was driving a lot of what they were doing.
Okay, so it's not as simple as like the people who make Prozac are trying to stop veterans from getting care.
No, because here's the thing about that take, is the people that make Prozac only really care about money. And so if there's money to be made, they'll just buy the thing that's profitable. Yeah. Like if you can make money selling psilocybin, let Pfizer buy the company that's selling psilocybin. Mm-hmm. That's the way this stuff works. The real question is, why did it take so long to get to this place that we're at right now?
I'm just tripped out because the clinical trials for MDMA were a big success. Yet somehow they were able to flood the minds of the people at the FDA with all of these sad stories of the past, and that was able to pump the brakes on the entire operation?
There were a couple of other reasons as well that are complicated and potentially boring, but I'm happy to outline them. One is that it's increasingly common in contemporary pharmaceutical development to outsource toxicology to one pharmaceutical company might do liver toxicology and then sell it to another one. So MAPS had a deal with another pharmaceutical company for the liver toxicology that then fell through, creating the sense that they had never done liver toxicology work on MDMA, which they had, but the licensing of the toxicology work was in some kind of contractual weird negotiation thing. Stuff like that. It was nothing real. It was nothing like they found out that it actually causes thyroid cancer or something like that.
Yeah. So I know you said that right now you're receiving some legal threats.
Yes.
And is this from Symposia? Is it from the pharmaceutical company?
Symposia are pursuing legal threats against another journalist right now through the Sarlo Family Foundation. The Sarlo Family Foundation has threatened me now as well for saying that they're an anti-psychedelic organization, and they wanted me to say that they are not an anti-psychedelic organization. They are a pro-children's safety organization.
Oh, so they're worried about kids getting psychedelics?
They just love children's safety.
Dude, why do people always throw up the "I'm here for the kids" thing? But it's just the easiest thing to hide behind.
It's classic.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
Satanic
classic.
Panic era, you know what I mean? My problem isn't with you and everything you do. It's the fact that these little monolithic children unit can't be exposed to the stimuli.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I was seeing all types of fucked up shit. I mean,
yeah, arguably it's not bad. I mean, arguably it's exposure to these things can actually have a protective effect. I mean, this is the idea, at least in part, with childhood exposure to alcohol consumption in France, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of childhood exposure, I'm surprised Symposia didn't offer me some money because of the HPPD.
I know. You could be, well, actually, there's another guy who's paid by the Sarlo family who I think does do HPPD research.
Because HPPD, for those who don't know, I took a lot of shrooms when I was 14 and I have permanent, visual damage, floaters, static at all times, and, walls do wobble and stuff, but I've gotten over it. Also some depersonalization stuff that accompanied that in my teenage years. I would have been the perfect person to get recruited by that lobby. And for a long time, I was kind of anti-psychedelic in general because my friend we had a rap group together back in the day called Self-Evident.
Plays hella crazy, then we rhyme to a maze, screaming fuck what they say, pipe placed every day.
We were pretty sick. We were opening for that slam poet Saul Williams. We were on some real hip-hop, lyrical miracle status in Seattle at the time. We were young poets. For some reason, marijuana led him to, LSD, and I guess he had some underlying schizophrenic genetics, and he just lost his mind. He was homeless for the next 10 years, got no worse drugs. And so between that and HPPD, I was like, all right, I'm gonna put the psychedelics to the side. Instead, I started drinking all the time. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, damn, that's not good either. So in a dream world, I would have waited till I was 18 to begin taking psychs.
Right, and I had a very, very similar thing happen as well. I was with a friend who had a psychotic break while we were tripping together, and it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And it took me a long time not to think that you're playing a game of Russian roulette every time you consume a psychedelic, because I'd just seen what appeared to be one of the worst things that can possibly happen occur. It's only now, with the benefit of hindsight and also having read epidemiological analyses of the incidence of psychosis among psychedelic drug users, which doesn't differ from the general population, that I'm realizing that they act as a stressor for certain vulnerable people the way many things can, right? It could be moving away to go to college. It could be getting into a car accident. It could be a new job. It could be breaking up with your partner or whatever. But a psychedelic experience can be a very, very powerful stressor. I mean, it can make you feel like you're dying. It can be insanely frightening for people. And some people are close to the edge already, and that can be what it takes to drive them over. So I am critical of a lot of anti-psychedelic reporting because I think it's not constructive, but I also think it's totally destructive not to acknowledge harms. And I think it's good to talk about harms because then you're just gonna fuck people up in a different way if you never talk about HPPD or you never talk about the potential difficulties associated with it. I think with HPPD, I mean, you probably know more about this than I do, but the numbers that at least existed, I think in the the Grinspoon analysis in the 90s was like 1 in 50,000 or something like that. It was considered very rare. They had two different types, right? There's like type 1 and type 2, where like type 1 is like transient occasional flashbacks that aren't disruptive to functioning, and then like type 2 is like continuous visual distortions that are highly disruptive to functioning. And they said that the latter type was like something around 1 in 50,000 people. I don't know if those numbers have subsequently been changed.
I've heard it's like 1 in 20.
1 in 20?
That's what
that have lasting inability to function due to visual
Not
distortions?
inability to function, but have the presence of multiple HPPD symptoms, according to Dr. Henry Abraham.
Okay. That seems like a lot. I mean, and I guess for people listening to this, again, I'm not trying to diminish it. It's kind of like when someone says, I have depression, and it's like, okay, or like, I'm depressed, and it's like, do you feel sad, or do you meet the diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder? That's not to say that feeling sad isn't a big deal, but like the kind of crucial letter in the HPPD acronym is definitely the D, like that it's a disorder, not that like you look at a bathroom floor that has like a repeating tile pattern and it looks a little weird for a second, or you look at some Venetian blinds and they have a moire pattern that's like a little bit weird for a second, like something that actually interferes with your ability to function, which, as I understand it, you do experience that.
Yeah, but I mean more so in the onset, you know, when it's first happening to you, like accepting that your perception has changed. It's like takes a year or two to really, or even more for some people, to just be like, oh my God, this is how I see now. I can't believe I see like this.
And is there anything, you said there's like derealization, is there tinnitus or anything like that as well?
No, but it's derealization and depersonalization, which typically comes like in the second or third year of it. But yeah, I always figured like, I never really talked about it because I didn't want to seem like I was super anti-psychedelic, because I've seen it have such positive impacts on people around me. But have you heard about any effective cures for it or anything?
No, I haven't heard of any effective cures. It would be interesting though to see, I could name a million things. I've heard people talk about benzodiazepines. Obviously, I don't think that's a good strategy. It would be interesting to try like a drug that blocks activity at the receptor that psychedelics bind to. There's one called ketanserin. There's another called pimavanserin that are both relatively easy to get. And they're also like very easygoing substances. They actually are like really nice for sleep.
You think you could get me some?
Yeah.
For real?
Yes.
Sick. How fast?
Could I get it for you?
Yeah.
Probably 2 weeks.
So you can just get shit like that.
I have ketanserin. I've done self-experiments with it. I also have pimavanserin.
Oh man. So but you can just get stuff. Have you done adrenochrome before?
The lab that I was working in had a vial of adrenochrome that we would joke about. I've never done it.
Doesn't it reverse aging and get you like special Hollywood powers?
That's their reputation, yeah. It's big in the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure they got a headquarters nearby.
It's easy to make. That one's very easy to make. Yeah, what's the deal? If everyone's so obsessed with adrenochrome, why is no one making adrenochrome?
Yeah, I mean, you'd kind of be the guy for that.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like the hardest psychedelic to make, in general, as far as synthesis goes, what have you had the most difficulty with?
Oh, damn. All right. I mean, I could go on with that one. Like, I mean, there have been quite a few psychedelics that I have tried unsuccessfully to make them. I mean, that's a big part of it, is I really like the challenge of making weird things. And a big part of the fun for me is like pushing the boundary of what can be made. So there's stuff like, the chemical in salvia, salvinorin A, can be modified to be even more potent. So I did a little bit.
Dude, salvia's fucking horrible. Do you like salvia?
I love salvia.
Holy shit.
As the salvinorin A coursed through my blood, I reached a state of bliss I never knew possible.
Oh, it's coming over me.
You're a seasoned veteran of this game, though. So, okay, anyways, you figured out a way to make salvia strong.
But I've loved salvia from day one. All right. I'm a lifelong salvia lover.
Crazy, man. All right, keep going.
And so, I mean, that chemistry is not so challenging, but it does have some interesting quirks due to different stereocenters in the salvinorin A molecule. But I've made things like the ethoxymethyl ether of salvinorin B. But the main thing is I've been actually working on this documentary about the quest to create the world's first tellurium-containing psychedelic. And this is just about broken me. It's been a damn nightmare.
Like getting the interviews or making it?
Making it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like I've been working on this since 2023, trying to make this drug and filming the process, which I dramatically underestimated because I had a lot of success at the beginning when I was first trying, which made me think that the whole thing would be really easy, or a lot of apparent success at the beginning. But then as the project progressed, everything started falling apart, and I realized that aspects of the chemistry had to be done in total darkness, other aspects had to be done in negative 60 degrees Celsius in an oxygen-free environment, and yeah, it's been tricky.
Holy shit, do you have a lab in your house?
No. Definitely not. No, I was working at this lab, Kaikion Analytics in Spain.
So if you work at a lab, you can kind of just get froggy, like when you're off work, and just get in there and just start making shit.
This was what I was doing. I mean, this was the only thing I have ever done in labs is make psychedelics above ground.
You've got a dream job for yourself.
I enjoy it.
Yeah. So you can make LSD easily.
I just made a really interesting variant of LSD. I don't know if I have to bleep this out, but it was propyl, fluoro, 1-propionyl, nor LSD, N6 propyl fluoro. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
But like making LSD is hard, right? Is that for you? Is that just like the easiest?
Okay, well, this is actually like an interesting thing of like, what does it mean for something to be hard to make? Like I remember reading this thing for forensic drug chemists, and it was like a number rating scale of synthetic difficulty of like, is it harder to make PCP than to make fentanyl, to make heroin, to make whatever? And the reality is like hardness is so much dependent on environment and all these other things. Like one of the main things that made LSD hard to produce was difficulty obtaining the precursor materials, but that's actually gotten quite a bit easier in recent years.
So what is the base precursor material?
This is definitely like a bleep out kind of thing.
Okay, I'll bleep it out. Okay. Do you have to order it from China and go down to like...
This is another bleep out thing.
What?
Yeah.
Nice. Have you ever done trank before?
No. But it's interesting. Have you done it?
No, hell no. I've only seen people with their arms falling off.
Right.
But I mean, I understand they're doing it the wrong way.
Actually, that's something that I wonder about, because normally when you see like with the crocodile type stuff, it's like the issue is people injecting substances that are impure dangerously with, non-sterile needles and things like that. But there's actually evidence that xylazine is intrinsically dangerous and causes tissue necrosis even when administered under medical circumstances in animals.
So it's just bad news.
It's something you don't want to inject, I don't think.
Yeah, I interviewed these guys who synthesize it kind of in Philadelphia, and they'd always say, okay, well, any addict who has an arm falling off, they must have missed a vein and it's their fault.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it's dangerous to inject it.
Yeah, you can't do it, period.
I wouldn't.
What else would you not do?
I mean, most of the stuff that people do regularly, I think, is a little dangerous. It's kind of weird how if you say like that you tried a drug called 2CT7, everyone will think like you're crazy. But if you smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol every day, people are just like, whatever. I think actually most of the common patterns of drug consumption are surprisingly dangerous, and people overestimate the danger associated with some of these like weirder things that I'm interested in. Not to say that there aren't dangers, of course there are.
What are some of the most dangerous drugs that are accepted among common society?
In terms of
drugs that aren't as stigmatized, that you feel like carry a lot of danger that could, you bless the people with some real game.
Because I'm not trying to scare people.
You're not gonna scare them, but I mean like some shit to be careful with.
Yeah, to be careful with. I mean, I think benzodiazepines are a really good way to fuck yourself up. And they're very seductive because people try them, and most people are like a little bit anxious. And so they try them and they're like, oh, fuck, I had anxiety all along. That's why I felt that way. And the reality is that's just being human. Like everyone is, or probably like 90% of people are a little bit anxious or a little bit tense about something all the time. And so it makes you very susceptible because you take Xanax or Klonopin or Valium or Ativan or whatever, and you try and you're like, oh damn, that's the solution to all of my problems. And it's very easy to medicalize your own use, where you think like, oh, I've got an anxiety disorder, I need to be taking this stuff. And then you set yourself up to become dependent on these things, which will ultimately not address the underlying issues with anxiety and make you horrendously dependent. But the nice thing about alcohol is that there's very little medical pretense. So if you're having a beer, it's like you're having a beer because you're trying to relax. You're not doing it because you're like, oh damn, my generalized anxiety disorder is acting up. I need my treatment right now. Like you know that you're doing it to loosen up and have a good time. But I think people paradoxically get into more trouble with medicalized use than with recreational use in some circumstances, particularly with addictive drugs. This I don't think applies quite as much to psychedelics, although there are issues there as well. well, because if you can medicalize your use of something that's potentially addictive, like amphetamine and Adderall, or really anything, then you've created a justification framework where you've given yourself permission to do something that otherwise might seem dangerous or unsafe or unsustainable.
One thing you talked about too is how the kind of movement for legalization of psychedelics took a big setback with the MDMA block. As it currently stands, like when I drive on the highways here, I see, ketamine clinic advertisements everywhere. What is the status nationwide of psychedelic legality?
Well, ketamine is an interesting one because it was already approved. So ketamine is, according to some World Health Organization documents, the most widely used anesthetic in the world. People say, oh, that shit's horse tranquilizer. It's everything tranquilizer. It's used on horses, it's used on cats, it's used on dogs, it's used on people. It's a drug that every organism that is involved with human medicine ends up getting injected with at some point, right? It is very effective. It has a very high therapeutic index. No one is allergic to it, or essentially no one is allergic to it. And so it's kind of like the first line. And because of that, you already had enormous numbers of people that were familiar with ketamine, knew how to administer it, and were able to prescribe it off-label for psychiatric use. So they never even had to get permission from the FDA to do this, because a physician can use a drug off-label if it's already approved. Then subsequently, they also developed an FDA-approved antidepressant ketamine formulation, but the majority of those clinics that you see advertisements for are not using the FDA-approved formulation. They're using off-label ketamine preparations. Yeah.
But is LSD legal anywhere?
No.
Is
not in the United States.
Shrooms?
They are in some states, yeah. In like Denver, Colorado. I think they're decriminalized in Somerville and possibly Cambridge, Massachusetts, and in Oakland, I believe, as well. And you run into a bit of a cannabis type situation where if something is legal in a city or in a state, there's always the concern that the federal government will retain the ability to indiscriminately raid people if they so desire, which is what used to happen with cannabis clinics and cannabis dispensaries.
You think all drugs should be legal?
Yeah, definitely. And that's not to say that all drugs are safe. It's just that I think that prohibition of drugs doesn't represent an effective strategy for the reduction of harms associated with drug use. We've tried it. We gave it an incredible shot. We've spent half a century and $1 trillion trying that strategy, and it has been catastrophic. And that money could be spent giving people treatment, agonist replacement therapy, psychological counseling, giving the homeless places to live, helping address the reasons that people actually use drugs in the first place. Like, arresting people just 100% doesn't work. It's not even a question of whether or not it's ethical. From a pragmatic standpoint, it 100% does not work. It's such a shame to me with like Elon Musk talking about throwing like USAID in the wood chipper. It's like, throw the damn DEA in the wood chipper. Like, there is an actual predatory taxpayer-funded organization that exists to terrorize US citizens that does no help to anyone, does nothing but harm. And no one is even talking about abolishing the DEA.
Well, what are we gonna do about the cartels?
The cartels are probably a product of the DEA. I mean, this is the thing. Once you have a regulated market, then the black market by definition disappears. Right? It's like, what are the cartels selling? Fentanyl? Well, isn't that lucky? Turns out most people don't want to use fentanyl to begin with. So if you have a regulated market, the fentanyl trade is basically over, except for a very small number of people that actually want fentanyl, and those people should help themselves to fentanyl if they want it.
When you say regulated, do you mean like stores?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at harm reduction facilities in San Francisco, they have everything shy of giving you the actual product.
Yeah. And I know that sounds extreme to people. They're like, oh my God, buy fentanyl in a store? Obviously, it wouldn't be like a convenience store where children can buy fentanyl. There would be some degree of, again, regulation. It would be restricted in a way that has worked pretty well for cannabis. I mean, you can access it, yet they check your ID when you go into the dispensary, at least in New York. You have a person who speaks to you and describes what you're getting into. I mean, I think that they already do that with opioids. They've done it for decades with methadone.
Yeah.
So it works really well.
We're not a methadone clinic. We're a treatment program that uses methadone to fight against the opiate addiction.
They do it with buprenorphine. It works really well. It's clear that a lot of the problems that are associated with drug use are a product of the way that they're conceptualized in a society and can be dramatically reduced. Again, it's not to say that there aren't any problems, but like I did this Vice piece years ago where the footage was lost. It was never released because something happened. But there was this Peruvian psychiatrist named Teobaldo Llosa who was performing this psychosurgical procedure where he was removing part of the brain of cocaine addicts, anterior cingulate gyrus, and was experiencing like what he felt was a dramatic therapeutic effect. And everyone's like, oh, this is the fucking Dr. Mengele of Peru. You're carving up the brains of addicts. This is totally inhumane. Horrible press for this psychosurgical procedure. So he decided, okay, I've got to figure out something else that doesn't involve brain surgery. And these were like the most severe cocaine addicts in Peru. So he's like, psychosurgery works, but everyone is saying that it's inhumane. Is there anything else we can try? And then he's like, oh, what if we give them coca tea? And it turned out that that was as effective as the psychosurgery. So it's like, give the cocaine addict cocaine in a dilute tea, and that works pretty well.
And facilitate it in a way that doesn't like encourage black market distribution.
Yeah.
I had some friends in Vancouver, BC. They have this group called the DULF, Drug User Liberation Front, and they opened up an actual store where they sold packaged and tested heroin, fentanyl, and cocaine in Vancouver for a while. And they're actually successful in reducing the fatal overdose rates in the downtown east side up there. And of course, the cops raided them, took this person, Arias, to jail. And it was just crazy because last time I went, I saw Arias and they were like, oh, everything's good now. But yeah, I mean, it works. It's just the idea to conceptualize is so against how we've been programmed. It's like, you can't sell anything but alcohol and cigarettes in the store. I mean, I guess now weed, we've reached the point where it's normal to sell weed, but if you ask somebody from the 50s about that, they'd probably be pretty shook.
And they would think it would be disastrous, and it hasn't been. It's amazing how quickly it goes. Like, there's maybe a period where it's a big deal, where people are like, oh my God, I can get a cookie, and like someone, you know, eats too much of a cookie and writes a think piece about it for the New York Times or whatever. But then you get over it, and then no one even cares anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the hope, is that the culture just evolves in such a way that these things can be normalized and not sensationalized.
Yeah, because if they opened up a fentanyl store, I mean, I don't know anybody who'd be like, oh, great, I'm gonna go try it.
Yeah, me neither.
But it's just the mind of, I don't know, it's just the mind of the people who aren't around that many drug users.
Yeah.
I guess they don't understand it.
They also, it's like people are getting fentanyl anyway. There already are fentanyl stores. They're just not regulated in any way, and they're more dangerous. So what you're really doing is just objecting to the concept of a safer fentanyl store.
You ever tried it?
In a medical context, yeah.
Patch?
I had a infusion before a procedure.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You didn't check it out?
Yeah. I was unconscious.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because I always figured, I've never done an opiate before, which is insane.
Yeah. You're not missing much.
Really?
I don't think so. I feel like all these movies made them seem so much more amazing than they really are.
You think that's a social engineering program?
I think it's, you know, it's just like a better story if heroin is like the absolute most amazing thing a human being can experience, as opposed to it just being like vaguely mid.
Yeah. So you think the train spotting dream is not real?
I don't know. I think maybe for some people it's really amazing.
For you, what's been the most beneficial psychedelic that you've used in your life?
Maybe Ibogaine.
What is that stuff?
It's this tree, well, Ibogaine itself is an alkaloid, but there's a Central West African tree called Iboga that is the foundation of a syncretic Christian religion, where they think that the tree of knowledge of good and evil in Genesis is Iboga. And they have this intricate mythology surrounding this plant that's like half Christian, half part of the, I guess, traditions of Gabon. It's pretty beautiful, actually. The whole thing is amazing. And they strip the bark off of the roots of this plant and have a religion where everyone consumes it, and it's highly psychedelic, and it's very much my vibe, I feel.
Where does it rank in comparison if you were to rank it in between psilocybin and MDMA?
I consider it like, the experience for me was like the most rational I've ever been. It was almost like I was tripping less than I'd ever been tripping before. Like my mind entered this state of totally detached objectivity, and I could see everything as it felt, as if it really was. It was amazing.
When's the last time you took it?
It's been years.
Oh, damn, that's a bummer.
Yeah. Although that's the beautiful thing about psychedelics, is that you can use them one time and that might be enough. You don't hear that with other classes as much, where people are like, yeah, I tried beer like 4 years ago, and that was enough. It was amazing, but like, I don't think I'm gonna go back anytime soon.
Yeah, dude, you're making me think maybe I should get some psychedelics going.
With the HPPD, obviously there's additional caution warranted, but yeah, I would say that it's potentially, you could like start very low and cautiously in a very calm environment and see how you responded, and then figure it out from there.
What do you think is the safest one I could do? out the gate.
Well, that's the other weird thing about HPPD is to what extent is it actually a function of the visual effects of psychedelics or the emotional effects? So if it were purely the visual effects, then you might think the more visual the psychedelic, the more dangerous it is. So I'd say like, whatever you do, don't smoke DMT because it's highly visual. But I don't think it is that simple. And it wouldn't surprise me if something like DMT actually was less disruptive than something like Ibogaine, which tends to be much less visual. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
short answer is I have no idea.
I'd probably want to do something with less visual symptoms. That's why I've been able to do MDMA like many times since then, because it doesn't present any visual stimuli. It's just a euphoric feeling, and I've taken sassafras actually, which some psych has a visual component, and it's been fine. It's just the hard psychs are the ones that I'm scared of. But every time I do them, I learn something.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting, especially because you're so publicly part of this. Part of
the HPPD disclosure movement.
Yeah. So if it makes
I only
things,
talked about it one time. Yeah.
But I hear people mention you talking about. They're like, oh, like Andrew has. Why do you need to talk about that? And so if it made things worse, not that I would want anything bad to happen to you, but it would be good to know that as well. And if it made things better, that would be awesome to know. And of course, it would just be one data point in all the different people that have it. But so I'm not suggesting that you should. But whatever happens, it would be probably good for people to know.
Yeah. I'll definitely document it. I want to try that thing that you mentioned first, the one you say can get me in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Ketanserin.
I was also thinking you're in like a pretty unique position because you introduced so many unique ideas and new substances that people may abuse, if they don't do it with the proper supervision or care. I feel like you have this unique thing going where people could like blame you for things going wrong in their life.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And even with a tiny bit of reason, there is some legitimate responsibility at play, which is why when people say, what is your favorite or what is the craziest, there's always these superlative questions related to drugs. And it makes me a tiny bit uncomfortable because I know that if I say Ibogaine is my favorite or whatever, that then it becomes an advertisement for that particular substance, sometimes literally. Like I've seen people cut up interviews that I've done and post them on Instagram to advertise Ibogaine clinics or whatever.
Totally.
So that is a reality that I've seen. Or even for me, because I'm so interested in obscure drugs that no one has heard of, I know that if I talk about it during this interview and I say, let me tell you about how amazing the ethoxymethyl ether of salvinorin B is or whatever, which by the way, I've never tried, I've only synthesized it. So I can't tell you that it's amazing, but I do suspect it's very interesting. And then people will want to talk about it, and then there's a responsibility associated with that. I wrote an article years ago for Vice about a chemical methoxetamine, and after that article, it became a big thing. I wrote another article about a chemical 5-bromo-DMT. After that article, people started selling it, right? So I've seen that happens. I know that happens, and there is an associated responsibility.
How do you grapple with that?
You just got to be cautious. And part of that responsibility is not even people necessarily hurting themselves. It might be those drugs becoming illegal. Most of my life, I've researched a drug that I don't even typically talk about publicly because I don't want to draw attention to it.
So it's not just about glorifying it, it's just even mentioning it could result in a catastrophe.
Yeah, because we're not so much, I would say that the greatest catastrophe is prohibition. That's the most realistic thing that can happen with these things. And it takes very, very little. Like with this recent DEA ruling of these two drugs, one of them, DOC, had been implicated in one death without a clear causal relationship. It was found in a dead person's blood. The other one, they couldn't provide evidence that a human being had ever consumed it. And so they were depending entirely on Reddit comments.
What's the drug called?
DOI.
Okay, no one's ever done it.
There isn't a peer-reviewed scientific or medical paper demonstrating that a human being has ever done it. People have reportedly consumed it, but there isn't a single paper, which might sound weird to people listening to this, but that's actually a pretty low bar. Like if you said, Hamilton, prove to me that people have done cocaine, I would have no difficulty proving it with lots of scientific studies that show people being arrested with cocaine in their blood and drug tests that show the presence of cocaine in hair and urine and whatever. With DOI, they have never been able to even demonstrate that a human being had consumed it, let alone abused it, let alone that it was a public health risk. And just Reddit comments were the basis of the government's decision to place this in the most highly restrictive legal category, which for DOI is a terrible, terrible catastrophe because this is like one of the major drugs used in psychedelic research by actual scientists.
So there's always these sort of like ridiculous setbacks that are being leveraged by people who don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about responsibility too sometimes. Like I used to always say when I was first doing interviews and podcasts, I would be like, man, don't get a job, just quit your job, just hit the road, it will figure itself out. And I always felt like people would email me sometimes and they'd be like, hey man, I was so inspired by that interview. I just broke the lease at my apartment and I'm hitchhiking across the country. And I'm like, Jesus. And if you die or something, or you get picked up by a serial killer and get your head chopped off, I don't want to be the guy they look at.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
but you also don't want to self-censor as well. You want to be real to your feelings.
And so I want to make it clear to the people out there, you're more than a pundit who explores psychedelic culture. You're a chemist. You're a scientist.
Sure.
Have a real brain that functions beyond the world of content. You're doing things the average viewer cannot possibly comprehend. You're synthesizing. You told me that you can read every element on the periodic table.
You asked me if I could read every element on the periodic table, and I said that I could, but I'm not even sure what that question means necessarily. I can read the names of them, sure.
It means that you're not, I'm just trying to make it clear that you're more than the drug guy from Vice. You have a very broad career and you've done a lot of cool stuff.
That's kind of you, thank you.
Yeah.
But I also don't mean that, like, it makes it sound like I have some kind of elite stance on this sort of thing, which I don't. I think that cultivating a informed relationship with these things is totally possible, but I appreciate this from a cautionary perspective.
Yeah, well, you just had such a high profile during that time. I mean, especially when they went to HBO, like you were straight up on TV, like Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing that shit and being like, dude, I wanted to be you when I was younger.
Interesting.
Well, I wanted to be on Vice.
Yeah.
Not necessarily be you. I wanted to be somebody with a Vice show. Could be Action Bronson, Maddie Matheson, Eddie, people like that.
Yeah, it was a fun time.
I want to talk about Vice a little bit. You tired about talking about Vice?
No, I actually don't talk about Vice very much.
If you look up Vice on YouTube, there's like this big narrative that Vice like collapsed or they sold out. I'm not really a Vice hater to that degree.
Yeah.
I think that they made a lot of really, great content, much of which you were a part of. But obviously there was a financial collapse of the company that occurred, I guess, sometime between 2015 and 2020.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You left in 2021, kind of on the heels of that collapse.
Yeah.
Looking back, before you left, what do you think caused the fallout and kind of the disintegration of the company?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a Vice hater either. In fact, I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to do so much stuff, especially because I've seen how difficult it is to sell stories to other publications. I mean, it's very hard. I'm making things completely independently now, partially by necessity. It's like, I'm not going to sell my show to National Geographic. I have to make it on Patreon. And Vice allowed me a huge amount of freedom. So to be clear, I'm actually not a Vice hater. I'm a Vice appreciator, and if anything, I feel a sadness. I feel like a sense of lost potential because something bad happened, which was a lot of things that happened at different companies in different ways, happening in concert in a very major and destructive way. One is like hiring executives that you pay multi-million-dollar salaries to, which is a pretty common thing at major media institutions. But I think the president of Vice, Nancy Duboc, was making like $2 million or something like that a year, maybe even more.
And she wasn't like a journalist.
No, and I think that's probably more than like the editor-in-chief of the New York Times gets paid, right? So it's like right off the bat, that's like the budgets of these companies are a zero-sum game. And if you pay the CEO or whomever millions of dollars, that's money that you're not paying to journalists. And ultimately, you need to support people who are being tasked with risking their lives to tell stories and taking these enormous risks on a daily basis. So part of it was coasting on the coolness of the early 2000s where they had a bad habit of underpaying people significantly, which was fine, when I was 21 or something like that. Like, oh yeah, well, we're gonna pay you for this magazine article, but we can't pay you to do this video, but like we can allow you to make the video. Like that was kind of the way a lot of stuff was at the beginning, where they would come up with some little way of shortchanging you, but it was so fun to make these things that it was easy to say, all right, fuck it.
And it's like the hippest thing around. So you're thinking like, all right, even if I don't get paid for this particular piece, I'm still gonna be able to grow my profile and maybe make different bags and do different hustles outside of this, right?
Right, and when you're 21, it's really easy to manipulate people when they're young because you have that feeling of, I'm sure you had this as well, where I think you've talked about this before with All Gas No Breaks, where they were like, oh, we can just, he's just a mic stand. We can just find someone else to be Andrew, right? So that's a game that all these people love to play, where they want you not to recognize your own worth. And, it's like, oh, well, you want to go to the Amazon and get paid? Well, there's someone over there and they'll probably go for free. So you can play those kinds of games with people, especially until they recognize their value. And so that was part of it, overpaying executives, underpaying the people who are responsible for carrying the company. Like my show was, depending on exactly what metric you looked at, either number 1 or number 2 between my show and Desus and Mero. And instead of really investing in supporting the show, there was a lot of resistance. They also did let me get away with a lot of crazy stuff, so I don't want to sound too ungrateful, because there is part of me that recognizes that there was something really cool about the entire enterprise. There was that. Then there were, of course, culture war type, cancellation type issues with a lot of the executives at the company who had built their brand on being ultra edgy and partying hard and selling advertisements by having sex with executives and having it was sort of, there was a lot of press about the non-standard workplace environment. I never really saw that much. I mean, people definitely partied, but it wasn't like
lines of coke in the bathroom, people banging by the fridge or anything.
No, definitely not.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
There was a bar inside of the New York office though, right?
Yeah, but everyone was working so hard. Like, I mean, I don't really drink, so it's not that surprising, but I never drank a single drink at that bar. And I don't think I know anyone that did.
It was just there as a courtesy.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe someone who's touring could go get a drink at that bar, but everyone else was probably so stressed about getting whatever it was they were making done that they weren't even thinking about having a good time. So that was part of it. There was a massive campaign to destroy them. Once the story of someone's destruction becomes a story in and of itself, it has this sort of self-sustaining destructive effect. You see this actually a lot on YouTube, where like someone almost becomes more famous for their disintegration than for who they really are, and then people just keep making videos. Like this happened with this guy iDubbbz. I don't know if you know who this is.
Also Brendan Schaub. I don't know if you know him.
Brendan Schaub is another one.
They just fucking tear him apart.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of happening with Will Smith right now. I'm not sure if you saw his recent freestyle.
I have not seen it.
Oh man.
This is the bounce back. Here come the bounce back.
He's on this sort of hip hop revival PR run. It's really bad. And I fuck with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So it's really hard to watch, but I know what you're talking about when they're like the ukulele apology lady.
Toxic gossip train, you're chugging down the tracks of misinformation.
Right, and it's like all these people like Brendan Schaub or iDubbbz or the ukulele apology lady, I only know them because of watching people attack them. That becomes the spectacle that overtakes whatever the thing being commented on actually was. So there was a lot of schadenfreude and glee associated with their downfall, which I also kind of get, right? Like they annoyed a lot of people. There was a kind of grating element where going back many years, you could tell that there was an appetite for their destruction.
Well, they were the coolest. And you can't be the king of counterculture for too long, because it's all about new, young energy, right? I mean, if they would have just corporatized and stood on it, I don't think there would have been such glee about the downfall. If they were just like, we're gonna sell out entirely and we're just gonna become like absolutely nerded out to the core. But Vice was at the top of the food chain when it came to like countercultural content output. So I feel like everyone's like, oh, Vice, it's only because they're like really number one. Like you'll just see that, and I think that because they weren't paying journalists a lot, you have two really dangerous things happening at one time. You have high cultural capital on the underground, but kind of some resentment being harvested on a grassroots level within the company.
Yeah.
Those are the two worst things that could possibly collide.
Yeah.
Because people from within are like, yeah, we're cool, but did you know these fucking dudes who are up top aren't cool, and we're actually the cool ones and we're not getting paid? That's how you see, and we might have to cut this out, but I see Eddie Huang, he made a whole fucking movie about how Vice sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, man. There's been so many people milking like the Vice sucks train.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I still see stuff on Vice where I'm like, this is tight. They made the documentary about us for All Gas No Brakes after the Vice had sold out and hired executives, and I think they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was good.
Yeah, like it's not as if they're not making anything dope anymore.
Yeah. It's also weird because a lot of what made Vice so good was, at least for me, the hands-off approach. That there was very little bureaucracy and micromanagement of what I was doing in a way that would have been totally impossible elsewhere. I got away with some crazy shit.
That's the second time you said that. What is the most heinous thing that you were able to get away with on the company dime working for Vice?
I mean, I made a episode of my show that demonstrated entirely how to make MDMA from start to finish. In
like a tutorial.
I wouldn't call it a tutorial, it was documentary work, but it showed in tremendous detail exactly how MDMA is made. And the entire time I was doing it, I was thinking, am I gonna get away with this? Am I just gonna actually televise the entire process in exquisite detail? And the answer was, yeah, I got away with it. And I made an advertising campaign for the show that ran in the New York subway system that also showed how to make MDMA and just told people that it didn't, and that was enough.
And how easy is it to synthesize MDMA?
Depending on how you do it, it's pretty accessible. Yeah, there's a way that became popular that's very accessible.
Do you like MDMA?
Not really MDMA itself, but I like some related drugs.
The come up is terrifying. I've always felt that way.
Yeah, I find that
like earth shattering, like all the blood in your body hits your head, and like, how would you describe with ornate words what it's like to get hit by the MDMA train?
I find it very unpleasant. But for me, the feeling is that I think I feel like a little bit of shame associated with drug use, believe it or not, and there's always this feeling, especially with like weed, where I'm like, oh, I'm being lazy, or this is hedonistic and excessive and unnecessary, and I shouldn't be doing this. I should be working, or I should be involved in something that's more purposive and productive and constructive. And there's something about the come up of MDMA that makes me feel like I've just done something really irresponsible, where I'm like, oh man, really? Yeah. Like, is this really like the thing? I need to do that now? I need to go into a flood of intense euphoria, and I have stuff to do, and this is gonna potentially interfere with the stuff that I have to do, because maybe I'll be emotionally destabilized and feel sad in the wake of this, and isn't that irresponsible? And so I have that kind of, this like, cycle of regret usually during the come up.
Yeah, last time I did MDMA was at Burning Man in 2019. I had this juggalo in the tent next to me named Gary, and he knocked on my RV and he's like, hey man, you want some MDMA? I got these moon rocks for you, right? And so he gives me 3, I thought they were half a point each, right? Inside of the tablets, or the capsules. So I get 3, I'm thinking it's a point and a half. So after I take him, Gary comes back to the RV and he's banging on the door. He's like, Andrew, he's like, there was actually 2 points of MDMA in each of those. And I was like, fuck. So I know I'm like, I'm not gonna throw this up. I have 6 points of MDMA I have to hit my bloodstream. So I walk out onto the outer playa of Burning Man, and it just hit me at one time. You know, next thing you know, I'm butt naked. Yeah! I don't know why, I'm sweating so hard. I jump over the trash fence, and the Bureau of Land Management rangers just tackle me and then throw me over the fence. And I was like trying to find my girlfriend, and she was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I love you. Even if you had AIDS, I would still have sex with you. You know, I was just saying crazy shit that, you know, I was like, why the fuck? I was only dating her for 2 weeks, you know, just saying shit like that. I'm like, fuck, somebody save me. And I went to this place called the Zendo Project. It was like it was a tent. There's a tent where you, if you have a bad trip, they call me now.
Yeah. Rick Doblin runs a lot of that.
Oh, word. So I go in there, everyone else is having the worst trip of their fucking life. There's like people like, as if they're about to jump out of a fucking 10-story building, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going into the fucking loony bin. So I'm like, why would I come here to calm down, you know? End up going back. Gary kind of gave me a massage and shit. Ended up smoothing out.
600 milligrams of MDMA.
Yeah.
Damn.
Big time. I hadn't done it since Andre Nicotina concert 4 years prior. And so it was just, it was a nightmare. But I want to do it again.
Yeah, get a scale, weigh it more carefully.
Yeah, I would do 1 point.
That seems like a responsible amount.
And it's a good thing for maybe an anniversary trip. You know, you could really bond with somebody you love off at 1 point.
Yeah.
2 points, you could bond with anybody. So Vice, yay or nay?
I say certainly in the past, yay. I don't know what they currently are doing. Actually, they asked me, they were like, we're bringing back the magazine. Will you write an article for it? And I was like, yeah, I want to do something about how Vice became the major outlet for pharmaceutical propaganda from USONA. And the editor was like, oh, I don't know about that. I feel like that wouldn't be good. And I'd asked Shane Smith about it, and Shane Smith was fine with it. And I was like, well, Shane is okay with it. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I don't know. I'm gonna need to talk with people about it. I don't know if they're gonna be okay with that. And then never got back to me. And I was trying to explain to him that actually it would make Vice look good.
Totally.
You know, like in the 3rd season of my show, I did an episode, the mistakes episode, that was entirely dedicated to mistakes I'd made in my own reporting.
Yeah, radical transparency.
Yeah, and it was good. No one used it against me. They appreciated that I was transparent about any problems with my previous reporting. And I think that's a good thing to show how these things happen. It's good for other journalists, it's good for the public. If the idea is that just everything that comes out, we're gonna pretend that it's true, even though everyone knows that journalists make mistakes, and no one ever issues retractions or corrections of any kind unless it's like the New York Times and you get like a little tiny thing at the bottom. But for the most part, we just pretend that everything that comes out is true, and if there's something wrong with it, people just hope nobody notices. That's a bad way to do things.
Super bad, yeah. We've been doing the same thing. Like we had this documentary about greyhound racing in West Virginia, and we spent so much time with this greyhound racing advocate and kennel owner named Steve Saris from Brockton, Massachusetts, that we sort of got psyoped by his propaganda, and we ended up putting out like pretty much a greyhound racing, sort of pro greyhound racing piece. And then we learned after that he was kind of full of shit, and so we issued a whole follow-up statement.
That's, this kind of thing can happen. You spend a lot of time with someone, they make a good argument, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, that's the case for a lot of issues where people most people probably don't have a strong opinion about greyhound racing. And so if someone's like, no, it's actually really, really good, I could see myself being like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, I just noticed that I tend to have a little bit of bias favored toward the person that I spent the most time with when I'm covering a story. The person who gave me the most access and showed me the most like kindness and gave me the most cumulative like hours of their time, I end up just feeling like more camaraderie with, unless I'm totally convinced that they're a piece of shit. Like if I'm, at like a QAnon rally, it's not like I'm gonna be won over because I spent 8 hours with someone as opposed to the opposition for 30 minutes. But with the greyhound racing topic, like I just happened to go to this guy's kennel and it was really well put together and he like showed us a great time. His opposition, I only had like an hour with them and they were kind of cold, but still they were kind of in the right in the end.
Right.
You ever had that kind of conflict of interest?
Wow. With someone that I enjoyed? Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had people who I was friends with. There was like a chemist, I don't know if I should say his name, but I guess I'll just say Casey Hardison, who then got accused of some like really foul stuff. And I didn't know about it at the time that I was interviewing him. So that's not quite the same, but it definitely can happen that you like somebody and it makes you more sympathetic to their perspective.
Yeah, like I was about to interview this escaped New Orleans inmate named Antoine Massey, the one who broke out of jail. And then I figured out that he had like a bunch of crazy ass charges for like domestic battery and false imprisonment. And I was like, fuck.
Right, and also when you're talking to people, I think as a journalist, you never want to be a moralist. You never want to be like judging people because it just would make it impossible to interview anyone, but that can get a little bit out of hand. Like I was spending a lot of time interviewing the rapper Big Lurch, this guy who ate his girlfriend at the time while he was high on PCP. Do you know this story?
No, but that's fucked up, man.
Yeah. But it's like, okay, so if you're interviewing Big Lurch, at some point, you've accepted that he ate someone. This is like an indisputable fact. So you're kind of past that. You're like, like baseline, you ate someone, and that is going to be an accepted fact of our conversation. And so I'm not going to be angry at you because then we can't have a conversation. We're just going to accept that you ate somebody. But then, then he starts saying all the stuff where he's like, I'm a Republican. And I was like, oh really? And he's like, yeah. I hate pro-life. I hate abortion.
You're like, you aborted a living person.
and then I was like, you know what? Actually, wait a second. No, I'm not going to listen to Big Lurch saying anti-abortion stuff because he ate a woman.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up, man. Do you feel like the psychedelic movement has been co-opted by posers?
Co-opted by posers. I mean, there were a lot of people that hated the financial interests or like, oh, these companies selling like bullshit microdosing classes or whatever. I don't really care about stuff like that. Like if you're not harming someone, let people do whatever they want. Let them have their microdosing classes or their mushroom supplements or whatever. Like that's not my issue. I don't even mind people writing dumb shit for the most part. It's really what bothers me is when people get involved in this very delicate space and introduce ideas that corrupt the movement or interfere with freedom and progress. So is it such a big deal that this guy frightened everyone about DMT patents no, but every single person that became afraid of DMT patents was using their energy to be afraid of an irrelevant concern and not federal prohibition of DMT. And the same is the case for so much of this stuff, where it's like people like railing against Compass and the clinical development of psilocybin. It's like, okay, you don't like the medical model? That's fine. Fight for policy reform so that you can use it non-medically and wherever you live. And that way you don't have to spend your life waving your fists at a pharmaceutical company. You can be free to do whatever you want, which would be ideal.
Definitely. So is it safe to say that Symposia kind of really destroyed the fight for legal MDMA?
Well, so it was a kamikaze mission. After they had this disastrous campaign to destroy MDMA, it came out that the lead woman was accused of beating her lover with a broom in a very Tom and Jerry style domestic abuse type situation. So she had beaten a man with a broom. And the really crazy thing is that one of the main Symposia people who had tried to have Rick Doblin canceled, once for patting someone on the shoulder non-sexually and transiently, but also because of an appearance on Joe Rogan, where this clip is like so unbelievably innocuous. I'm sure you could find it, but it's Joe Rogan is saying something like, it's crazy to believe that people used to live without technology. You know what I mean? Like cavemen didn't have technology. And Rick Doblin is like, well, many people still live without technology, like people that live in the Amazon. And so this guy said that Rick Doblin had compared indigenous people in the Amazon to cavemen.
It's like, well, they're all in the Stone Age.
which he never said, but also it's just so ridiculous. So it turns out this guy who had spent his life attacking people, had distributed underage pornography and had stalked people, broken down their doors, slashed their tires, and was a complete psycho. Like, I'd been harassed by this person as well. They'd harassed everyone, and they had been, actually, I think it's actually more interesting. Symposia had always been careful not to say that they were officially a member of Symposia, just an ally of the group, which makes you wonder, how much did they know all along? I think it's almost more suspicious that they arbitrarily made a firewall between themselves and this one ultra psycho person. So one of the people is pretending to be indigenous and was outed for lying to the FDA and beating her boyfriend with a broom. The other one distributed underage revenge pornography and stalked ex-girlfriend. The other is living with his wife, who is a coworker, which I think is ethically questionable. And the other dedicated her life to trying to destroy an indigenous man who she had consensual sex with, but could only get New York Magazine to publish it because every other magazine wanted to speak with the person who's being accused. New York Magazine was the only publication that had lax enough standards to allow this to be published. And one of them, I don't know, he's probably just gonna be like a freelance psycho harassing people on Twitter.
And those are the core Symposia members?
Yeah.
Those are the people that stopped MDMA from being legal for use for PTSD therapy?
It's almost inspiring if it weren't so horrible.
It's fucking insane.
Yeah. It was a small number of, and I've known a lot of these people for years because they were always part of the psychedelic world. They were kind of like the feckless, dumb people who didn't really have anything to contribute, and then they came together and became immensely destructive.
Hi, Hamilton. We know each other, but my name's Brian Pace.
Oh my God.
I'm with the...
you give the microphone to him of all the people in the audience?
So I'm with the Center for Psychedelic Drug Research and Education at The Ohio State University. I'm also the Politics and Ecology editor at Symposia.
I think like one moral of the story is just how much damage a group of psychos can do. Like they really scared everyone, because part of it is that people are doing shit. Like people that have stuff to do are busy. They don't want to be in a Twitter war with crazy people. Like right now, if this interview comes out, they're kind of destroyed at this point, although maybe this would be enough to get them back on their feet. But they have allies. Shayla Love at The Atlantic will write an article about how I'm a misogynist for criticizing her reporting. It will then be amplified by a finance blogger named Josh Hardman, who works with the patent attorney who frightened people into thinking that DMT vapes were threatened by patent law, who also frightened people into thinking that hand-holding had been patented, another completely absurd thing that even was repeated by John Oliver. So these people will all, and then they have there's Olivia Goldhill at STAT. She's an ally of this group who's a part of the so-called entrepreneurship of psychedelic negativity. She'll, maybe write an article. There's someone named Katie McBride. She's also part of this. Like, I'm not saying that they're like a conspiracy where they're all working together. There's just a kind of weird cluster, but they do know each other. And then there's Michael Pollan's publication, The Microdose, which is also engaged in ultra passive aggressive coverage and elevating symposia, weirdly, but in attacking people like me in subtle ways whenever they can, amplifying lies that people tell about me. This is Michael Pollan's official newsletter, actually. I think he just doesn't watch it, and it's being run by someone who's got Sunday morning cartoons playing in their head.
And Symposia is literally, is that a dumb person? Yeah. I'm gonna use that one. So Symposia is a useless group of paid activists trying to throw a wrench in the game for no reason.
Yes.
What's their reason? Just money?
To prevent sexual abuse.
No, that's a smokescreen.
Yeah. What is their real reason? They got paid reportedly, we can censor this, but reportedly $185,000 by Susie Sarlo. And that's not including the money that Bob Jesse paid them while he was part of the board of directors of USONA. So, and that's just what I know about from people telling me. It's possible there was more.
And why did Susie Sarlo pay them?
Because she wanted to get revenge on MAPS because she lost a portion of her inheritance.
She is the sister or daughter of the Holocaust survivor?
Yes, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this has nothing to do with anything but a personal vendetta, and they're using identity politics on a grassroots paid activist level to prohibit the rival pharmaceutical organization from getting legal MDMA approved so that she can have a better chance at getting her settlement in the future.
Yeah, I don't think she's even getting that money, but it's very close. I don't think she's even getting the money. I think it's just a personal vendetta at this point. I don't think she's getting the money that she donated to MAPS back, although they did create some kind of civil lawsuit for elder abuse, claiming that they'd given him drugs and he was had Alzheimer's disease and couldn't consent to consuming the drugs or giving this money to MAPS. I actually met the woman who is accused of elder abuse at the MAPS conference, and she seemed like a nice lady to me. I don't think she
wasn't beating up old people with brooms.
She didn't seem like the type to strike anyone with a broom.
I wouldn't beat any old people.
Yeah.
All right, so what are we going to do about these people? What's the plan? How are we going to take them down? What can the people of the world do, the 5cast viewers, to destroy these bastards?
I guess just be aware that anytime you see some psychedelic journalist trying to frighten you over something that seems like it might be bullshit, take that possibility very seriously and ask yourself, why is this really an issue? Like, if someone at a USONA-related company is telling you that you need to be afraid that some pharmaceutical company patented a combination of MDMA and Viagra, ask yourself, why should I be afraid of that? How is my freedom being reduced by this? Who is going to benefit if this is prevented? Why is this an issue? Because they've been extremely good at poisoning the discourse with bullshit of one kind or another. And the true tragic irony of this is, if the stated goal of preventing sexual abuse were real, then having a formalized, approved clinical framework for the therapy to be administered would be the best way to prevent that type of abuse, because you'd have an entire protocol that could be obeyed or violated, and you'd have resources where people could lose their jobs. One of the really frightening things about underground therapy, doing underground MDMA psychotherapy, Nishay also threatened to out a bunch of MDMA therapists, so she's also a narc in addition to everything else. And one of the things about underground therapy is that you're already working outside of any kind of a legal framework, so if something goes wrong, it's very hard to find resources to get help. It puts you in a weird position to say, hey, I was doing this underground MDMA therapy, I was taking this drug illegally, and this therapist actually like spooned me, and I think it was inappropriate, and what should I do? Like, the cops are just gonna be like, okay, are you accusing them of assault? Are they drug dealers? Like, they're not going to try to adjudicate whether a therapeutic transgression had occurred. They're just going to figure out whether or not it was a drug crime. So in their like stated quest to prevent sexual abuse, all they did was prevent the creation of framework that would have real accountability and a protocol to prevent the very type of abuse that they claim to be so dangerous.
And they knew that if they could find an example of sexual abuse in particular, with how incendiary that stuff is in the press, that'd be the best shot they have at delegitimizing the opposition.
Yes, and even the one who was distributing underage revenge pornography would go to participants in the trials and try to coerce them into saying that they had been brainwashed by MAPS or that they'd been abused. So they would take vulnerable people who had a PTSD diagnosis and would tell them that they were crazy and that if they didn't think that they had been abused, it was because they had been brainwashed, right? This is insane that they did this. And I know one of the women who underwent this kind of like post-therapy abuse from Symposia, where they were trying to convert her to being one of them and saying that she was a victim, and it completely fucked with her head. Because you have someone who has PTSD, which is an extremely serious disorder, who then receives this experimental, unapproved treatment, has a miraculous recovery, but you have issues with trust. Then a stranger comes to you and says, hey, you think you got better from PTSD? No, you've been lied to, you've been manipulated. The whole therapeutic recovery that you thought you experienced was just brainwashing by a cult, and you actually weren't healed at all. That's a really good way to fuck with somebody's head. And it had an extremely negative effect on the woman who was a victim of this activist group who were supposedly trying to help victims.
It's crazy to think how outspoken this group was about like progressive causes, like pulling every identity, culture war thing they could possibly think of and try to make the other side look bad.
Because it works. That's the other thing, is it's like they took a page out of the book of USONA as well, of like, oh, we'll say we're a nonprofit, then we can do no wrong. Nonprofits are very much capable of harming people, and nonprofits are very much capable of doing creepy things with money. And I think that people need to be very careful of these organizations. And even like you're saying, like paid protesters, right? Like it's like almost uncomfortable talking about this because it feels like it buys into every conspiracy theory. But the point is that this kind of thing really does happen. And it was one of the most horrifying and destructive things I've ever seen. And basically not a single journalist wrote about it. They denied it. They, even after Rachel Newer took these tremendous risks to publish it in the New York Times, Katie McBride, who's like an ally of Symposia, published some article basically saying that it was all irresponsible, everything that had happened in the New York Times. So I encourage anyone listening to this to read Rachel Newer's reporting in the New York Times and understand that not only is everything that she said true, it is the tip of the damn iceberg.
And there's no George Soros involvement.
No. Just one crazy lady and one pharmaceutical company, USONA.
Fuck yeah, well, thanks so much for your time, man. I appreciate it. Any parting words to the youth of the world, the children of this planet?
Yeah, be suspicious of the news, regard it with suspicion, but also be smart about it, be critical, make your own news, have a good stance on all of this to the best of your ability, because we're going to live in a world of increasing dishonesty and bullshit, and it's an existential responsibility to develop a well-calibrated bullshit detector and understanding of the world.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And also subscribe to the homies Patreon.
Oh yeah, patreon.com/Hamilton Morris.
We're gonna put the link in the description and the pinned comment. If you don't subscribe, we're gonna terrorize you. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Hell yeah. I hope I asked some good questions, bro.
That was awesome.
Great. Channel 5 live worldwide, Hollywood and Vine. Fuck the authority, Channel 5 News. Channel 55. We don't fuck with custers. And 5 is the best number.